Welcome back, guys. My name is Chris, and in this video, we're going to be talking about advanced PDFs. Now, just to be clear, I did come out with a video recently talking about printed forms, which is technically the umbrella in which advanced PDFs falls under. There's also basic forms, which I talk about in that printed forms video. So if you want that simpler, less aesthetic, much more rigid version of basic forms, you can look at that other video. In this video, we're going to be focusing on advanced PDFs. But just to be clear, not getting into what I would consider the higher level capabilities of advanced PDFs, which is requiring you to know how to use HTML. So if you don't know HTML, this video is for you. And honestly, most clients that I run into don't have someone on the team who has a lot of experience using HTML. So this is going to be a video to have you, even if you don't know, still be able to utilize advanced PDFs for reasons of either printing or emailing out to clients. So with all of that in mind, let's take a look at this. All right, so here we are in NetSuite, and we're going to come up here to customization, down to forms. And there's a few things to notice here. On the subject of printed forms, which is this umbrella, you have advanced PDFs is the recommended route to go with. But then you also have what's considered basic forms. And so here we have the basic form for PDF, which is really like printing it. And if you want to have a basic form that you email, you would use this transaction form HTML layout. Generally speaking, I do not recommend you utilize basic forms, even though it sounds simpler. It's actually pretty annoying to work with. Advanced PDFs in almost every instance is going to be the preferable way to go. So let's open up our advanced PDF templates. And we're coming to a page here that's basically just a long listing of both the existing templates that NetSuite gives out of the box in relation to their advanced PDFs. And you can see that here, anything that says customize on the left here, these are all templates that NetSuite just gives you. As soon as we scroll way down, we're going to start seeing these edits. These are examples of custom PDFs that were made using the templates. So let's open up one of these. We've got a custom purchase PDF. Let's open this guy up. And what it's going to do is it's going to bring us to this advanced PDF, and we can start influencing this thing. So you can see we've got the PDF down here. We can scroll down. We've got a lot of different fields here, and I'm going to break all of this down for you. But before we do that, instead of just looking at this in the format that we would start influencing, I want to show you what the actual end product is supposed to look like. So to do that, we're going to come over here to preview. If I click on that, it's going to first off say, okay, we're looking at everything that's in the template, and now we're going to try to populate that. Obviously, this is not tied to an actual purchase order yet, so it's just going to fill in blank numbers for everything. So you can see the purchase order number is 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. It's got a bogus number for totals, bogus items, all that stuff. But you get a concept of what this final thing is going to look like. So you can get that perspective of, am I building this thing correct? Does it look the way I want to? Are all the fields linking up properly? You absolutely want to utilize the preview feature very frequently. So backing out of this, there's a couple concepts. Before I really start diving into showing you how you're actually going to manipulate this thing, there's a few things you need to understand about advanced PDFs. The first thing is that the preferred way to deal with advanced PDFs is using HTML or a language of some sort, which I'll explain a little bit more what that means in a second. But that is the preferred way to handle it. So to do that, you would come in here to source code. You can see right now it's X, meaning we're not using the source code. We're looking at the actual template. If I click on that, it's going to first ask us, hey, do you want to transfer to the source code? And we're going to say yes. And you can see it brings us to this. Now for average programmers or developers, you're going to understand what's happening here and why this is formatted this way. But for people who don't have any familiar with HTML or any other markup or programming language, this is going to seem like we're looking at the matrix. It's just going to be incomprehensible, which is totally fine. You don't need to come in here and influence things if you don't want to. You can stick with this. And what we're looking at here is the second route to influencing advanced PDFs, which is what I'm going to teach you here. And this is called what you see is what you get, also known as WYSIWYG. It's just an acronym for what you see is what you get. And the concept is literally what you're seeing here, all of these different fields, that's what you're going to get in your final PDF. So you don't need to see it in code. You can just see it as it's laid out. So that is what I'm going to be showing you. But before we dive more into that, I just want to make one additional comment on the HTML route. If we look at this document, there's a few different things we can see here, right? There's really two major elements, in my opinion, of what we're influencing here. We're either influencing what I would consider the cosmetic or the layout element of this PDF. So that would be things like, how do we arrange the fields? Do we want something to be bold, or do we want to italicize or font size? What is the background coloring? These are all cosmetic elements. And the second element is the literal fields that are going to be linking. So for example, this is going to be linking to the purchase order and finding the vendor that's on that purchase order and populating that information in here. So that templating aspect, that table linking, is a second totally separate element to this. We've got the cosmetic layout side, and then we've got the linking aspect. And if you're dealing with the actual coding or the languages behind this, if you're dealing with the layout cosmetic element, you're going to be utilizing, as I've mentioned before, HTML or something called CSS, which, especially if you want to make some really creative, cool looking PDFs, you're going to be utilizing something like CSS. However, if you want to start influencing the actual linking, what fields is this going to be digging into? It's using let's just call it a language for the sake of this, called FreeMarker. Now, if you don't know anything about the technical aspect of this, FreeMarker and HTML, let's just say that they're very similar. They're definitely not the same thing by all means, but they are quite similar, and someone who knows HTML will recognize FreeMarker and will be able to easily pick up the subtleties of FreeMarker to be able to work with it and influencing it. So when we go to the source code, this actually can incorporate all three in here. You can have some elements that are HTML, some elements where you're bringing in CSS code, and then some elements that are going to be FreeMarker. And then once you're done with the final PDF, you're fine with all the source code, and you go to preview and then ultimately use that advanced PDF, these things are all going to be kind of converted. FreeMarker is the ability to take this all and then convert it into what NetSuite actually needs to operate, which is fundamentally HTML. So you would use these three languages, bring it all together, and then NetSuite can operate with it. But again, that's all assuming you know how to use these things, in which case I'll make another video on specifically for people who can code in HTML, how you would navigate this. For now, we're going to stick with WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. So let's take a look at what we got here and start influencing things. There's a few features we have up above, which is first off, template setup. This is pretty basic. This is just like, what are you calling this custom PDF? You can add a description. Let's say you have 10 different PDFs for purchase orders. You want to include a description so someone coming in can easily see, well, these templates are for this, these other templates are for that, etc., etc. You then have down here, unfortunately make these almost look like they're disabled, but you've got a couple checkboxes here. Like I said, if you've got several templates for purchase orders, you can have one that's going to be the preferred template for purchase orders. So that will then be defaulted and utilized in that case. And then of course, if you've got multiple and then there's older ones you don't want to utilize anymore, you can make them inactive. And then coming down here, we just have a few basic features in terms of what the page is going to look like in the first place. So is this going to be a letter size page? Or are we going to go with legal, which is A4, it's longer? And then of course, are we portrait, which is kind of up down, or landscape, which is more of a horizontal orientation? And then some basic margins. So we're giving ourselves 1/2 inch right now for margins on all sides. You can change it if you want 1 inch margins on the top and bottom. You absolutely can do that. So this is all quite basic. Closing that, we have change ID. This is getting into, if you're dealing with SuiteScript and you want the ID that this advanced PDF is going to be referred to be different, you can come in here and change that ID. But for someone who's going to be dealing with WYSIWYG on advanced PDFs, you're not going to be changing the IDs. So just leave that alone. Then coming over here to actions, right now you can only see delete. So again, if you've got an advanced PDF that you don't just want to make it inactive, but you want to get rid of it entirely, you can delete it. And if you have a need for it, you can download this thing either just as a template or in a form of extension markup language, which you see here as XML. There's also a fourth option, which you don't see here, I think primarily because we're in a demo account, but there is generally a copy to account feature, which allows you to take a PDF that you've created in a sandbox environment, or maybe a release preview, and you can copy that over to your main production environment. Okay, so we've looked at some of the upper level things. Now let's take a look at the PDF itself and understand the various aspects that we can have here. So first off, coming down here, if I click here, notice it grabs a blue box around this whole section. Okay, if I click down here, it grabs another blue box. And then same as I go down here, it's never just grabbing one particular field. You can see my cursor highlighting on item here, but it's grabbing this entire box. So that box is a table. And then the field specifically in that table, well, really what we have here is you have, and we'll go to, this one's a little bit easier to understand. This is a table that has two columns. So tables, as you probably know already, tables are always made up of columns and rows. So this one obviously has two columns. On the left side, it's actually got two rows. And then on the right side, you can see we've got three rows that are accessible. Okay, so we've got these various rows and columns, and then within them, we have particular fields. When you're dealing with fields, there's actually a few different types of fields that you can influence. You can have fields like if we come in here, you can have a field that actually, if I hover over it, I think you can see that. Yeah. So you can see the little pop-up that comes up and it says record.total. This is a linked field to the purchase order. So when you use this template PDF for a purchase order that comes on, there is a field and the ID for that field on the purchase order is going to be called record.total. That's a specific field that totals up all the items that are included on that PO. And you would see that linked here. So it's not going to say total there. It's going to say a number linking to that field. So that's one type. Then you have this, which is just a text box. So it's just text that you can put in. Technically, that whole thing is still a field, but this is where you're just going to type in information. Like in this case, it's being used as a header for this column, where underneath it, we're going to see the total for that purchase order. We can also add what are called labels, which are titles, but they're linked right next to the field information. And I'll show you an example of that in a second. But if we did that down here, it would look like total, and one is going to be a label that you actually see on the final PDF, and the other total is going to be the number that's linking in from that purchase order. So that is the basic composition of this. We've got our tables, we've got the rows, the columns, the fields within them. So we're starting to piece this together. Another element that you can interact with is if we come over here, you can see this little image symbol. You can bring images into your advanced PDFs, and that's most commonly used with logos. So if you have a company logo, something of that sort, you can link it in to the advanced PDF so that you have your own logo appearing at the top of your purchase order, sales order, whatever you're dealing with. All right, so now we've got a little bit of orientation. I want to lay down some rules, not just diving into, okay, here's how you add one thing, here's how you add another thing. I want to give you a framework and a sort of a rule set on how best to approach advanced PDFs. Because especially when you're using WYSIWYG, you're not going into the code, advanced PDFs can be very fragile. And I'll even show you an example of what that looks like way later in this video. But it's very easy to what I call break or create a problem or an inconsistency in the advanced PDF that either makes it so it's completely unusable or it just breaks it to the point where it won't even show you a preview of what that PDF looks like. And because they're so fragile when you're using WYSIWYG, again, if you're doing the source code using HTML or FreeMarker, it's much more stable, especially if you know what you're doing. And it's much more predictable in terms of if I put in this line of the code and then I do this, this, and this, I know it's going to come out with this result. And maybe I'll make a mistake and I can easily fix it. Not the same when you're dealing with WYSIWYG. Sometimes things you think and are positive they're going to work because they've worked in the past, it's just going to cause a problem and you're not really going to know why. So it's a lot of trial and error that you have to utilize when you're dealing with WYSIWYG. And the reason that's important to understand is because it's going to feed into a lot of the advice that I'm going to give you as I go through this video. So the first point I'm going to make is go slowly and carefully. So you're not just going to be throwing things in your PDF. You definitely don't want to just start dragging things around. That is an easy road to breaking your advanced PDF. What you want to do is one thing at a time, very deliberately, and then check your work. So for example, and I don't want to, well, maybe I'll do an example where I'll add something. So I'm going to show you how you add things and go through all the logic, but I'm just going to quickly add something in here. So let's say I add a particular field. And again, I'll show you what I did there, but just understand, I put something new into this. And as soon as I did something deliberately where I went, okay, I've just added a field, that's what I want. The first thing I would do after that, I wouldn't go on to the next thing I want to influence. I would preview it. I'd come over here and I'd hit preview. And it should pull up another example of that PDF. So you can see if we come down, I think I added it in here. So you see vendor test 1A. Okay, so I think the 1A element was something that I had added in there. Great. So it looks like the PO worked. The field that I added is totally fine. Awesome. So that means that was acceptable. So as I do one action and it works and I preview and I know it worked, your friend, and this is probably the biggest piece of advice I can give you, every time you do something that is successful, you come up here and you hit save and edit. The main reason for that is because there's no Control Z. There's no way to just easily click a button and say, oh, I did something wrong. I want to undo that. It doesn't work that way. Now you can come in here. I think this was the field I just added. I can come in here and I can delete it. But again, it's a pretty fragile system. So you might add in a field and that's fine, but then you want to delete it. That causes a problem. You never know when it's going to happen, but that can easily break something if it was placed somewhere where the system can't understand or doesn't know why that's being deleted, or maybe it closed up a gap and it doesn't know how to handle that. It can easily get to a point where it says, we don't know how to handle this PDF anymore. And when you do that, it causes a problem because you can't just Control Z that and go back to where you were before. So if you're adding things to your advanced PDF, what you want to avoid is you successfully add 4 things and then you add a 5th thing, you break it, and now your only solution to get around the fact that you've just broken it is to come up here and hit cancel, basically undo everything you just did, and then go back into the PDF and try to re-replicate it. So save, and if you do save and edit, what it's going to do is going to save the PDF and keep you there. So you can just save it and then keep working, no problem. I highly recommend you use this, not even if you're just using WYSIWYG. If you're using HTML, I still recommend you do it. And if you talk to anyone who's dealt with advanced PDFs a lot, most people who've dealt with it enough know just save any instance you can remember. It's always a good thing to do. That being said, and I'm going to show you examples of all this so you start to get a little bit of a better understanding of like how this is going to play out and how you would utilize this. But let's say you've been running through this for a while. You get to the point where something breaks and then it accidentally gets saved, or maybe even things are going fine, but you realize that an earlier version of this PDF is something you want to go back to. So how do you go back to one of those earlier versions? It's not like there's just like a file cabinet that you can look at and go, oh, I want to click on version number 4. And this is a trick that I've noticed even people that know how to utilize advanced PDFs, most people do not know that this trick exists. You can find what version you're currently on, and then you can try to troubleshoot what version you want to go back to and look up that advanced PDF. So how do you do that? Well, if you notice down here on the left, I know this is probably almost impossible to see. God only knows why they decided to put it in font 3 at the bottom left of the screen. But if you read very carefully, it says template version 7. So they tuck it way in the corner. This is what we're currently on, is version number 7. And the trick you can utilize if you want to go back to an earlier version is you come up to the URL at the top here. You have to go way to the end. So right now I'm way at the end of the URL for this current PDF. And if you come in here and you add an ampersand and then version, you type in version. So it's a little and symbol, version, and then hit equals. You know you're currently on version number 7. So you can try this out. You can go, all right, and if you know you just broke something, you would know, I want to go back to version 6. But maybe you know something existed a few versions back that you liked and you want to bring that back. You don't remember which one it was exactly. You can just try it out. You can put in version 4. So you hit enter on that. And it's going to bring us to the PDF. And you can see if we look down here in the bottom left, template version 4. It just immediately dialed us back to that. Now it hasn't saved anything. So if I cancel out of this PDF and I come back to it, it's still going to be on version 7. But if I want to jump around, let's say I come here and I go, you know what, version 4 is not what I wanted. I want to go back another version. I can come over here and I can say, let's change that from 4 to 3. So I go now back to version 3. And let's say version 3, I go, yes, this is exactly what I want. Excellent. Now I want to save this. Now I can come up here. I can go save and edit and see what it's going to do here. Right now it's saying version 3. As soon as I save it, it's taking that version and it's treating it like it's an entirely new version. Even if I didn't change anything on it, it now puts that up at the top of the queue. It's now version 8. And it doesn't matter if you're doing 80 versions of a template or 3,000, the fundamentals of how that work are identical. You can always type in ampersand version equals whatever one you want. It'll pull you back to that. You can recover lost data if you need to, or go back to an earlier version. Okay, so those are some general tips that you can utilize if you want to start influencing this thing. But now that you understand how to handle this, now how do you actually do what you want to do, which is add fields and tables into this thing? So if we come down here, you can see we've got this taskbar where we have a lot of different options. There's really just 2 that I would say in 90 5 to 99% of instances, you're only ever going to use 2 features here. The vast majority of them you're literally never going to touch. And the 2 features, might come as no surprise, are going to be table and field. So in other words, you want to add tables, you want to add fields to this thing, because the concept is that you're not building this thing from scratch. You're always going to utilize an existing template, and you're just going to make little changes to it. So let's say you want to add a table. I would come down here, and you want to be very careful where you click to make sure that you're deliberately like, okay, I've got this table up here and this table down here. I want to add a table in between them. So I'm going to click on the far left of this, and then I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to click table. And it's going to say, okay, well, what kind of table do you want to add? Well, I want to add a table that has 2 columns and let's say 2 rows. Very simple. You've got a number of other features here. Most of these I don't really feel the need to comment on. They're pretty basic, but I do want to comment specifically on height and width. You can come into height and width and influence it not just for tables, but for fields as well, or even images. You'll see that in a second. But when it comes to height and width, you can either put an exact amount like pixels, 40 pixels, etc. But the fact of the matter is, I certainly don't know what 40 pixels looks like. I generally don't recommend you influence height and size or height and width by pixels. I usually find it's easier to navigate it using a percentage. So right now, if we're dealing with width for a table, now we wouldn't put in a height because the height is really dependent on the rows and the information that's being populated in there. So you're not going to put anything for that. But when it comes to width, the width is from one end of the page to the other with the margins considered. So as we saw earlier, there's a 1/2 inch margin on both sides. So within that zone, 100% means the table is going to fill in the whole distance. If we wanted the table to only fit in 50%, we could change the width to 50%. And then we can come down here and change the alignment to, let's say, right, if we wanted the table to be 50% all the way on the right. So you can do some basic formatting there. And then you can go to advanced if you want to change a couple basic features. Again, this is nothing crazy. If you want to go into some really in-depth customization for how these advanced PDFs look, that's where you want to go into HTML, CSS, free marker, etc. Right now, we're just doing some basic changes. So we're going to say border color. Let's say we have a green border. That's going to be the border not only around the table itself, but also in between rows and columns. And then we can add a background color. So we have these colors. We can also grab the palette. I'm going to set a color that's pretty gentle, just so it's not annoying to look at. So we've set a background color for the entire table as being this sort of light red pink. And we can even add a border style if we don't want it to be solid lines, we want it dotted, etc. We can change all of that, but I think you get the idea. So let's now add our new table. If we hit save on that, it pops right in there. And if we click off that, you can see, hopefully you can see, the lines are green, although it's pretty faint. And you can see it's this light pink formatting background color for the table. So good, we added our table. Notice it input it right in between this top table and the bottom table. Now at this point, honestly, maybe I'm a little bit careful when using WYSIWYG. I would still come up here and hit preview and just make sure I put in something that is at this point acceptable. So as long as it doesn't break at this point, boom, we've got our little table. It's pink, it's in the right place. Excellent. So I'm going to close that. I'm going to close that other one as well. So now we can start putting things in our new table. Great. So we can come in here and we can select whatever row column intersection that we want, and we can come up here to field. So under fields, I can come up here and we've got this long list of fields. Now, first off, let's minimize this guy because it comes out with record, which record is going to be the one you go to by far the most. But just so you understand the context here, you've got record as an option. You can also, which means basically we're looking at fields on the record. In this case, it's a purchase order. So it's going to give you a listing of all the fields that could be on a purchase order. But we also can pull things from our company information or the subsidiary. And this is definitely used much less common. You can pull from the user, meaning whoever user is accessing the PDF, you can pull from that person or from the preferences, and that's pretty infrequently utilized. Now, when it comes to company and subsidiary, the one recommendation I would give people, because I've seen clients make the mistake of saying, oh, I'm making this advanced PDF. I want to put my company address at the top. So I'm going to come in here to company information. Not necessarily. Unless you're a company that you are a single subsidiary company and you never intend to have multiple subsidiaries, in that case, I'd say fine, use company information, no problem. But if you are a multi-subsidiary organization or feel like that might occur in the near future, what you want to avoid is going with company information, because what's going to happen is you're going to make an advanced PDF. And if you want to utilize that, let's say 2 months from now, you realize, oh, I want to use this advanced PDF for our other company. Well, now what you got to do is you got to make a separate PDF. And in that one, influence the company information to link to that company. Otherwise, it's going to pull from the first company you were dealing with. So now you've got multiple versions of one PDF, all to handle different companies. A much more sensible route is to link in subsidiary information, which is really accomplishing the exact same thing. But now, if I'm using this template from subsidiary B, and I'm going to be, pulling this in from a purchase order in subsidiary B, it's going to pull in the company information for subsidiary B. It's going to look at that subsidiary, which is relevant to that circumstance. So generally speaking, I don't use company information ever. I always just stick with subsidiary because that's usually a much safer approach. But again, record is what you're going to be pulling from by far the most. This is all the purchase order transaction details that you would want on this kind of an advanced PDF. So you can see we've got all these things listed here. You can see the general description. You can see the actual ID code of that thing, the record ID, and you can see them all listed out here. So let's add in one at random. Let's come in here and say, actually, let's grab an easy one. Let's go to date. So we can see date here. It's just going to add right down here. You see date got put in there. So that's a linked field where it's going to pull in the date from the purchase order. And it's going to put that information in right here. But what if I want to pull in that date and I want to have a label so that I can tell that it is a date? It's not the ship to date. It's not the receive by date. It's the date on the purchase order. Well, in that case, I'd want to come up to the top and I'd click this pretty easy to miss include labels button. So then I come down here, again, I click date, and notice what it does here. It puts date. So if I close this, and now I click on it, so this is a linked field pulling in the date. This is a label, and even if I hover over them, notice you can see record.trandate. That is the ID for the tran date. And if I come over here, it's got that at label. So that's how I can easily tell, oh, this is not an actual linking field. This is just a label. And then this is, again, that standalone link. So I'm going to delete this one. And let's take a look. Now that we've added this date field, what are we going to do? We're going to hit preview. We're going to see if this worked. So let's come here and click this. And we're even going to see if an error comes up as a result of this. I have a feeling it might. There you go. So you can see right up here, this is a common problem you're going to run into, and I see clients have an issue with this all the time. Right before we hit preview, I had date, and then I had the date with the label. But notice when I hit preview, it gave me both of them. I can see I've got the date here on the left, and then I have the label, and then the date again. So you might ask yourself, well, why is it doing that? You deleted the second date. Why are we seeing both of them? Well, the fact of the matter is, like I said, this thing is finicky and it's fragile. It is showing a preview that's not even entirely accurate. If I went to utilize this advanced PDF in its final form, now I know it's not broken because if it was truly broken, it wouldn't have even shown me this in the first place. But I know if I utilize this advanced PDF, it would not show the date twice. It would only show it once, and I'll even prove it to you. We'll come back to our advanced PDF. Now, I have not saved this, so I'm going to come over here to save and edit, which again, you generally wouldn't do that unless you know you're on the right track. And if we hit close on this, and remember, we had date and date. It was the little label. It didn't have two separate linking fields to the date, just one of them. And if we scroll way back down to that advanced PDF that we were just on, I believe it was this one, this purchase template with suite tax. So we're going to open that up again. And it should come as no surprise to you that it did save the correct date with its label. So it only kept one. It didn't include both. And now if I go to hit preview, it's going to pull in the correct date. It's not going to have this kind of phantom date that's included. So you can see just the label, the date, and if I compare that to what I just had, there was no difference. I didn't make any change between the two other than saving the PDF, but otherwise I didn't influence it any differently. We just have this sort of phantom residual of a field that we had already deleted. So this is something else you have to watch out for. You might go to preview and you might see something and go, I don't understand. I swear to God I deleted it. It's consistently showing me this thing over and over again. That's fine. You might have to save it, back out of it, go back into that PDF. Now let's say you save it and then it's still somehow messed up or broken. You can use that version trick that I showed you to still go back to an earlier version and then save that as a new one. So you've got a few different tool sets to try to work with the fact that, let's be honest here, this is somewhat of a janky system that doesn't always work the way you want it to. You just need to be aware of the kinds of problems it's going to throw at you. And as long as you're expecting them, it becomes easier and easier to work with this from a WYSIWYG standpoint. Okay, so let's go back to our template. So we added a field, it worked great. We've got our table. Let's add a different type of field here. Let's come down here and I'm gonna go back up to field. Let's say I wanna add let's say currency. So I can add currency in there again, so it populates it down there. Now let's come over here. Let's close this. Come over here. And now what I want to do here is I want to add, I showed you how to use labels before, but oftentimes what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to have that top row be a header. So you might want to come in here and you might want to say, you want to type out date. So that's my label. That's just text. Now I can come in here and just like I'd done before, obviously, it's not a perfect example of a template. I'm not trying to make a useful template. I'm just trying to show you the mechanics of this. I can again add that date, and it's populated that field here. So now if I come in here and preview this, it's going to show us that text that I manually typed in right here, and it's going to show the date, which is just the field because I didn't include label down here. And then, of course, it pulls in the currency just so you can get another concept of how a field might look. So great, everything's working so far. I would back out of this. And at this point, if these were all things I wanted to do, I would definitely come up here. I would do save and edit, and then I would just keep moving down the line in terms of other things that I wanted to add. So let's talk about a couple additional features. If we click on a particular field here, so let's say we can even grab this row, we can now come over here into styles, because right now we've only been on this new element feature, but we can come here to styles and we have a lot of things. You'll recognize this if you ever dealt with Microsoft Word or Excel. These are the same things: bold, italicize, underline. Do you want to align it to the left, to the right? Do you want to add bullet points, etc.? Again, just be careful. It's pretty easy to add bullet points and have the whole thing break. I'm not saying it does it every time. You just have to be careful of how you're dealing with these things. One thing in particular I want to point out though is you can come over here. This is a field you want to influence a lot because this is where, based on what you're grabbing, you can come here and you got some additional features. So right now we're grabbing a row. We can come in here and we can go to row properties. So let's click on that. So for that top row of that table, we can come in here. We can change the row type, we can change its alignment, we can give it a height if we wanted to. We can come into advanced and we can say, okay, for this row, I want the background color to be light purple. And I can, change it. Do I want it solid, etc. So if I save that, now we have that light purple. It's kind of like another version of pink at the top there, different than the rest of the table because we set a background for the table and then we made this row in particular a different color. So you can start influencing all of these things as you want to try to provide within the limitations of WYSIWYG as much feature depth and customization and especially a cosmetic change that you want to. So let's take a look at some of the additional features. So far we've discussed, I would say, the bread and butter of what you're really going to be influencing, but there are a few things that you can look at. So for example, we have this text box. So this is where you come in, not just make a table and you want to type in some text. That you would just do by clicking into one of these tables that you'd created. But if we wanted to make a separate text box, which I do not recommend, again, it's pretty easy to break the system using these floating text box. But let's say at the very top of your invoice, you want to include a big text box for whatever reason, you can come in here and you could click text. It adds this little box. You can type in some information here. So we click that. Now let's go to preview. And notice what it just did. You probably didn't notice it as we were pulling that up, but it added a text box here. And in doing that, it jammed everything down. It didn't know how to handle that and the indenting and the header at the top. So it crunched everything here down. It shoved that in the bottom. It created all these problems on our template. So we might look at this preview and go, oh, that's not what we want at all. So let's go back to our thing. We click on this box. And once you click on it, now you could obviously delete the text inside of it, but we want to get rid of that entire text field. So I could come over here and say delete table. It's going to remove that whole thing. Okay, so you might tell yourself, okay, good, we handled the problem. We're all good. We went back to where we were, but not so quick. We want to come back to preview and we want to see if it really did solve the problem. I'm going to venture and guess and say it didn't. And I'm correct. So this is a little bit tricky because right now we're still seeing that phantom box here. So we could still back out of our PDF, but you got to be careful at this point because I would not save and edit this thing. It's a perfect example of how you can easily break these things, and then it can be a little tricky to backtrack to what you want to get to originally. And that's just an example of why I generally don't like adding just floating text fields. It's usually more stable in the system if you add a full table in appropriate places and then you put in the necessary information in that table. You can add a table that is one row by one column, which is basically the same as a text field, and then put in whatever text you want. Over from that, we have image. So you can add images, like I said. So in this particular case, let's come in here and say over here, we want to add an image. So what you're going to do is you're going to put in the source URL for this. Now, if you're wondering where you get the source, you would add the image into your file cabinet, just like you would do for your logos, your company logo. And when you add them in your file cabinet, it gives you the ability to look at what that URL is, and you can take that and you can put it in here. So let's say it's your company info logo. You can put that in here. It'll link that in. And a couple things you should be aware of in relation to this. So right now it's locked off in regards to height and width. So it's going to take whatever that original logo file is and it's going to put it in. You can't change how this thing is going to be shown. So if you wanted to influence it and you said, I want to make the logo bigger, you can unlock this and you could say, okay, width. And again, I wouldn't do this in pixels. I would generally do it in percentages. You would say, I want the height to be, 15% of the document or 10% of the width. You put in those widths and heights, and then you'll be able to put that logo in. So that is one trick you can utilize. However, my general recommendation is if you find that a logo is coming in and when you look at the preview of the PDF and the logo looks small and you want to make it larger, I would not manipulate the logo on its own. Generally speaking, what I would do is I would go in, and I'll actually show you how to do this. If you come into Setup, Company Information, you might already be aware of this. But most people most people know this, but they don't know how it relates to these advanced PDFs. If you look here under company logo, and it says forms, because you have company logo pages and forms. We're talking about forms right now. So this is our company logo, which right now is just a US flag. If we had this logo is too small, what I would do is I would come in here and I would bring in a different logo. If it's a flag, I would just make a bigger image file for that flag. So instead of being, let's say 400 by 400, I would bring in a 700 by 700. I would upload that in here so that every advanced PDF you utilize that's using your logo at the top, you don't have to custom change that size on every single one that you have and every single new one that you ever make. You can put it in one time here and it's going to update automatically for every single advanced PDF that you have that is utilizing that same logo. So that's just a trick to save yourself some time. Coming back to the logo or the advanced PDF. So that's how you can add images. Again, I would generally recommend you don't mess around with this tool. It can go wonky pretty easily. Usually the templates already come with a logo and that's what you're going to want. So again, the two things you would use the most is add field, add table. Moving over to the right here, this is another example where you're always going to be pulling from an existing template. And if we scroll down here, notice it comes with a page number and from the total page count. So if we come to an example of this PDF and I scroll down, notice it says page 1 of 2. Great. These PDFs all come with that. So if you come over here and you see, I want to add page or add page of page total number, why would you ever want to add this? You're not going to build this template from scratch. You're going to pull from an existing template. It's already got it on there. So the only circumstance where you would ever influence these is if you accidentally delete that page number and you need to add it newly, which is somewhat of a ridiculous circumstance. So generally, I never touch these. Down here, you can add an additional footer section at the end of the page. Again, if you want to add something at the bottom, just add a table and customize it. I wouldn't go in here and start adding this. It can easily break what you already have. You also have the ability to add a horizontal line. This one's a little bit safer. It's just the formatting feature. Let's say in between this table and this table, I want to add a little hard line across. I can come in here and I can hit enter. And now that I'm in this in-between space, I can come here and I can add horizontal line. So if I come to preview that, I honestly don't remember if we've already broken this thing, so it might look weird. But if we add that, no, okay, good. So it managed to reformat this so everything looks fine at the top, and it's added a line right across here. So it's a pretty simple formatting feature if you want to add it, but you can utilize it. Just be careful, make sure that you're testing things out before you're using it. And then the last things are header and footer. So currently, notice they're both blue. That means we are both using a header and footer. I just wouldn't touch these. That's my safe bet for it. If you click it, notice what happens. We've got this header at the top here. If I click it, it's just going to wipe out that header. And I could do the same thing here. If I had a whole footer at the bottom and I click that, it wipes out the footer. That can cause major problems with your PDF and just wipe out something you thought you already had, or even if you're trying to add dead space in there, there's better ways to do it. I usually wouldn't utilize these. Okay, so at this point, I've shown you everything I really think you need to know and how to do the fundamental corrections and additions to an advanced PDF. The last thing I want to do is actually deliberately break this PDF and then show you what that looks like, because you're definitely going to come across it at some point. So let's start just moving things around. Let's start adding things, deleting things. We'll take that off. We're going to move that one over. We're going to delete that. We're going to change some of the text. We'll come in here. I'm just doing some random things, right? We're going to add additional fields. All right, so we've pretty thoroughly just kind of messed things up, put things in weird places. Hopefully that broke this thing. You know, again, sometimes it won't. Sometimes it's a little bit magical in terms of what it will and won't accept. So let's come over here to preview and let's see what happens. Okay, so this is what I wanted to show you. So it will give you an error message like this if you truly broke it. It's not just going to give you some weird look. It's saying, no, we cannot handle this. We do not know how to populate what you just bizarrely did in WYSIWYG. So it said, and it's, by the way, it's not just for WYSIWYG. If you're doing in the coding, it's going to give you the same kind of error message when it's going to say error on line, some number, and then some column. And we can hit detail. The markup in the document following the root element must be well formed. Okay, so this is kind of a slap in the face answer where it doesn't even give you specifics. It just says you screwed this up. Go back to an earlier version. And that's fine. If you came across this, I would hit cancel, back out, come back in where you know it's correctly working. Generally, if you don't break it too bad, you'd get a much more detailed response here where it would say, okay, not just line 261, but this specific element, we didn't know what this was, or you added 2 equal signs, and per HTML, we should only have 1 equal sign there. And so this is not going to be workable. So it'll give you a hint of what you're looking for. And what you can do is from the information you see here under details and knowing the line number 261, you can come here to the source code. Now, I generally don't recommend to do this, but if you're feeling adventurous, you can. And you can see we have the line numbers on the left here. So what you would do is you would scroll down, and again, I'm not going to do this for the sake of this video, but you would scroll down to number 261. You'd go to that literal line. Let's say it was this one. And hopefully the details gave you some kind of a hint of what is the problem. So let's say the details said there's a problem with the word style. That's kind of a simple example, but you'd come in here and go, okay, line 120, style. I know there's a problem with that. And you could try, you go, okay, well, what seems to be the problem with this? Maybe it's spelled wrong, or maybe there's not the right boundaries on either side, or maybe there's just something there that shouldn't be there. And you can just delete it. It really depends. You know, you can double click on an entire line. And if you know that there's something weird that went on there, you could delete an entire line, go here and then go to preview and see if you've now fixed the problem. Now, of course, in this particular case, we didn't just not fix the problem, but we added new problems by deleting 2 probably important lines there. Oh, in this case, it actually did give some more information. It's saying, hey, style must be terminated by a matching style. So you have a style earlier on that's explaining what's going to come, and then there's no matching style element that's going to complete what it needs for that table data. So that's causing an additional problem. So it's not even showing us all the problems that we're running into here. I'm sure there's many, but it is showing us one particular one. And if you are feeling adventurous, you can always try to go into the source code and see if you can work it out for yourself. All right, and that is your overview look at advanced PDFs and how you can influence them using WYSIWYG, even if you don't know how to work HTML. I hope you found that video helpful. If so, please hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. And with all of that in mind, I hope to see you in the next video.